The air in St. George's, Hanover Square, was thick with incense and silent dread. Lady Evangeline de Vere stood like a porcelain doll, her hands freezing in the grip of a man she despised. This was her wedding day, but it felt like a funeral. Her father, the Baron, watched with a steel gaze, the bargain for her future nearly complete. The bishop raised his hands, his voice echoing in the rafters. If any man can show just cause, why they may not lawfully be joined together. The words hung unanswered, until the great oak doors of the church crashed open. A man stood silhouetted against the light, his gaze fixed only on her. He strode down the aisle, his boots echoing on the marble, and in the suffocating silence he spoke 3 words that shattered everything. "I am her husband." Lady Evangeline de Vere felt the pearls at her throat tighten like a noose. Each one represented a day of her life sold, a concession made, a freedom lost. The man beside her, Lord Percival Finnegan, cleared his throat. It was a dry, rasping sound, like old parchment. His hand, when it had taken hers, had been clammy and cold. "A fine day, Lady Evangeline," he had murmured, not looking at her, but at the crowd. "The entirety of the ton has turned out." Evangeline had said nothing. She was a sacrifice, and sacrifices were meant to be silent. Her father, Baron de Vere, stood in the front pew, his posture ramrod straight. He was a man carved from financial anxiety and dwindling pride. This marriage was his masterpiece, his final desperate gambit to restore the de Vere name. He had spent years grooming Evangeline for this moment, reminding her that her duty was not to her heart, but to her bloodline. A bloodline he himself had nearly bled dry through bad investments and a thirst for the gaming tables of Pall Mall. Lord Finnegan was not a man of noble birth, but of staggering, almost offensive wealth. He had built an empire in shipping and finance, and he sought the one thing he could not buy, a legacy. The ancient, albeit impoverished, de Vere name was the perfect acquisition. Evangeline was simply the collateral. The bishop, a man whose jowls wobbled with self-importance, began the rites. "We are gathered here today in the sight of God." Evangeline's gaze drifted past the cold, assessing eyes of Lord Finnegan to the stained glass window. It depicted a saint being martyred, his face serene. She wished she felt serene. She felt only a hollow, echoing void. The void had a name. It was a name she had not spoken aloud in 3 years. Alistair, a memory, sharp as a shard of glass, pierced her. A wind-swept Scottish hillside. The rough feel of a wool cloak, a promise made not in a cold cathedral, but under an open sky, with only the wind as a witness. It was a foolish, youthful, passionate memory, and it had no place here. Her father had assured her it was meaningless, a fantasy. He had shown her the proof, the cold, legal papers of annulment, the letter from Alistair's family stating he had been sent to the continent, his youthful indiscretion already forgotten. "Evangeline," her father had said, his voice terrifyingly calm as he held the papers over a candle. "This never happened. You were compromised by a fortune-hunting second son. I saved you. Now, you will save us." She had believed him. The silence from Alistair had been her proof. 3 years of silence. It had scoured her heart raw, leaving behind this obedient, hollow shell. "To have and to hold, from this day forward," Lord Finnegan recited, his voice monotone, as if reading a ledger. Evangeline closed her eyes. She drew a breath to repeat the words, to seal her fate. "For richer, for poorer." A disturbance, a murmur from the back of the church. Evangeline ignored it. A draught, perhaps. In sickness and in health, the murmur grew, becoming a gasp. Lord Finnegan paused, annoyed. "What is the meaning of this?" he hissed. Baron de Vere turned, his face contorting in sudden, violent colour. "Guard, remove that man!" But it was too late. The heavy tramp of boots on stone was not a draught. It was an invasion. Evangeline's head snapped up. Her heart, that useless, dormant organ, suddenly slammed against her ribs with the force of a battering ram. He was no longer the boy she remembered. The man who strode down the aisle was broader, harder, his face a mask of cold fury. The sunlight from the open door caught the sharp line of his jaw and the ice in his blue eyes. This was not Alistair Vane, the reckless second son. This was Alistair Vane, the 10th Duke of Ashington, a man believed to be half a world away, a man who had inherited a title and a fortune that dwarfed Finnegan's by orders of magnitude. He did not stop until he stood directly between her and the altar, his presence sucking all the air from the cavernous space. Lord Finnegan puffed out his chest. "Sir, this is a private ceremony. You have no—" "Be silent," the Duke commanded. It was not a request. Finnegan flinched as if struck. The Duke's gaze finally landed on Evangeline. The ice in his eyes melted, replaced by a storm of pain, possession, and a rage so deep it vibrated in the air. "Evangeline," he said, his voice a low growl that was hers alone. The bishop, recovering his senses, stepped forward. "My Lord Duke, this is highly irregular. The ceremony is—" "Stop," the Duke ordered. "On what grounds?" the bishop sputtered. "By what right do you interrupt these holy rites?" The Duke of Ashington turned his head, addressing not the bishop, not the gasping crowd, but Evangeline's father. The Baron had gone a pale, sickly white. "You ask by what right?" Alistair's voice boomed, rich and full of command. He looked back at Evangeline, his eyes locking with hers, bridging the 3 years of lies in a single, devastating second. He let the silence stretch, forcing every soul in the church to lean in. Then he delivered the 3 words that would ignite a scandal to burn for a decade. "I am her husband." 3 years earlier, Evangeline de Vere was not a bartered-off lady. She was a 19-year-old girl with a dangerous capacity for hope, trapped in the polite, suffocating confines of her father's crumbling country estate, Stonecroft Manor. Alistair Vane had arrived with the summer storm. He was the nephew of a neighbouring landowner, the irresponsible second son of the then Duke of Ashington, sent to the country to rusticate after some rumoured scandal at Oxford. He had no title then, no great prospects. He had only a quick wit, a disdain for authority, and the same wild streak Evangeline recognised in her own carefully hidden heart. They met in the woods, not the ballroom. She was reading poetry on a fallen log. He was trespassing with a fishing pole. "You are on my father's land, sir," she had said, clutching the book to her chest. "And you are reading Keats before noon. We are both clearly criminals, milady." His smile had been sudden and blinding. A secret friendship bloomed in the margins of their prescribed lives. They met in the ruins of an old abbey, sharing ideas, dreams, and stolen apples. He didn't treat her like a porcelain doll. He treated her like an equal. He listened to her opinions on politics, on art, on the ridiculousness of the London season. And she, in turn, saw the man beneath the rakish reputation, a man of deep intelligence and a fierce, loyal heart, chafing under the expectations of his distant, powerful father. The love that grew between them was inevitable, a force of nature as undeniable as the summer storm that brought him. The catalyst for their flight was a single, carelessly dropped comment from her father. "Lord Finnegan has expressed an interest in our family. He dines with us Tuesday." The name Finnegan, even then, was synonymous with cold, hard commerce. Evangeline felt the first chill of the cage closing around her. That night, she met Alistair in the abbey. Her panic was a tangible thing. "He will sell me, Alistair, like a horse." "Then run," Alistair said, his eyes blazing in the moonlight. "Don't walk. Run. With me." It wasn't a proposal. It was a statement of fact. "Where?" she whispered, the forbidden word a prayer. "Scotland. Gretna Green. We can be married over the anvil before your father even realizes you've missed breakfast." It was madness. It was ruin. It was the only air she had been offered to breathe. They stole 2 of the Baron's best horses. They rode for 2 days, sleeping in barns, living on bread and cheese, and feeling for the first time utterly free. The world was reduced to the thunder of hooves, the grasp of his hand, and the promise of forever. Gretna Green was not romantic. It was a small, smoky blacksmith's shop. The priest was the smith himself, a towering man named Robert Hume, his face smudged with soot, his hand strong enough to bend iron. The rites were fast, simple, and legally binding. "Ye be Alistair?" he'd asked, his Scottish burr thick. "I am." "Ye be Evangeline?" "I am." "Do you take this man, with no thought for his title or coin, but for the heart within him?" "I do," Evangeline had vowed, her voice ringing with a certainty she had never known. "Do ye take this woman, to cherish and protect, even when the world bids ye not?" "With my life, with my soul," Alistair had sworn, his eyes on hers. Robert Hume brought his hammer down on the anvil with a deafening clang. "Then ye are one. What God and the anvil have joined, let no man tear asunder. Now, sign the book." They had signed the parish register, their names side by side. Alistair Vane, Evangeline de Vere. They spent 3 days in a small Scottish inn, 3 days of stolen bliss where the world didn't exist. They were not a duke's son and a baron's daughter. They were simply a man and a woman, husband and wife. They made plans to travel to the continent, to write to her father from Paris, to present him with an undeniable fact. But the baron was faster than they knew. On the 4th morning, the door to their room was kicked in. The baron stood there, flanked by 2 formidable-looking men. His face was not sad. It was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "You," he spat at Alistair, "have just destroyed your life." "Sir," Alistair said, stepping in front of Evangeline, "you will address me with respect. This is my wife." The baron laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Your wife? You deluded fool. You have married a fantasy. And you," he turned to Evangeline, his eyes like chips of ice, "have brought disgrace upon us all. You will come home. Now." "I will not," Evangeline cried, clinging to Alistair. "We are married, Lord de Vere," Alistair insisted, his hand on the hilt of a small dagger he carried for travel. "It is done. It is legal." "Legal?" the baron sneered. "Legality is a matter of money and influence, boy, of which you have none. My daughter is a minor by English law. This farce is nothing. It will be annulled before you can blink." "I will fight you," Alistair promised. "You can't," the baron said, a cruel smile twisting his lips. He tossed a letter onto the table. It bore the crest of the Duke of Ashington. "Your father agrees. He has already cut you off. You are disinherited. You are a penniless nobody. You have nothing to offer her but ruin." Alistair read the letter, his face draining of colour. It was his father's hand, his father's unforgiving words. He was, in an instant, truly and completely alone. The separation was brutal and swift. The baron's men tore Alistair from Evangeline's grasp. "I will find you," Alistair yelled, fighting them, his eyes wild with despair. "Evangeline, no matter what he says, I will find you. I love you." "Alistair!" she screamed, but her father's hand clamped over her mouth, and she was dragged from the inn, bundled into a carriage, and spirited back to England. The journey home was a blur of tears and threats. When they arrived at Stonecroft Manor, Evangeline was locked in her room. She was a prisoner in her own home. For a week, she refused to eat, pounding on the door until her fists were bruised, demanding to see a solicitor to send a letter. On the 7th day, her father entered. He did not look angry anymore. He looked almost sympathetic. It was the most dangerous expression he had. "He's gone, Evangeline," he said softly, placing a tray of food on her table. "He will come for me," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "No, my dear, he will not." He sat in the chair by her window, blocking the light. "I have made arrangements. I have spoken with his father, the Duke. The Vane family is ancient and proud. They do not appreciate scandals, and they certainly do not appreciate a penniless second son attempting to trap an heiress. I am not an heiress, and he is not a fortune hunter." "They see it differently," the Baron said, waving a hand. "It is all settled. The ceremony has been annulled. It was illegal from the start. You are a minor. It is as if it never happened." "I don't believe you. I am his wife." "No," her father said, his voice hardening. "You are not. You are my daughter, and you have committed a grave error in judgment, one that I have, at great personal expense, rectified." He produced a document, embossed with a legal seal, an annulment. It looked official. It spoke of non-consummation and parental non-consent. It was a stack of sophisticated lies on expensive paper. Evangeline's world tilted. "This can't be." "It is, and there is more." Her father's eyes were cold. "Alistair Vane is not the romantic poet you imagined. He was paid." "What?" The word was a breath. His father was furious. "But I saw a way to solve this discreetly. I offered Mr. Vane a sum, a significant sum, enough for him to live comfortably on the continent for many years. He took it. No, he wouldn't. He would never." But the seed of doubt, planted in the fertile ground of her despair, began to sprout. "Wouldn't he?" the Baron pressed. "He is disinherited. He has no prospects. You offered him a connection to my name. I offered him cold, hard cash. He chose the cash. He signed this paper, relinquishing all claim on you, and took the first boat to Calais." He handed her a second letter. The handwriting was Alistair's. It was short. "Evangeline, your father has made me see the truth. Our adventure was a child's dream. I have brought you nothing but ruin. I cannot offer you the life you deserve. This is goodbye. Do not look for me. I release you from your vows. Alistair." The paper fell from her hand. It wasn't the words. It was the signature. It was his. The fact that the letter was a forgery, expertly copied by one of her father's more criminally skilled associates, was irrelevant. She believed it. The silence had been her proof. No letters came. No messages. No sign that Alistair Vane even existed. Her father told her that Alistair's older brother had died, followed by the old Duke, and that Alistair, now the new Duke, was in India or America, consolidating his new, vast fortune, clearly unbothered by the girl he'd left behind. The hollow void had formed then. Her heart had walled itself off. The passionate girl who had run to Gretna Green died, and Lady Evangeline, the obedient daughter, took her place. When her father, his debts now truly catastrophic, had presented Lord Finnegan as her suitor, she had simply agreed. What, after all, was left to fight for? Until this moment. Back in the church, the entire congregation was on its feet. The air was electric. "Husband!" Lord Finnegan sputtered, his face a mottled purple. "She has no husband! Baron, what is this madness?" The Baron, white-faced but resolute in his lie, pointed a shaking finger at the Duke. "This man is insane. He is lying. He is a stalker, a madman who has harassed my daughter for years. Bishop, call the constables. Have this lunatic removed." Alistair did not even look at the Baron. His eyes were still on Evangeline. The pain in them was a mirror of her own. "Do you believe him, Evangeline?" he asked, his voice low. "After all this, do you still believe the lies he told you?" Evangeline's head was spinning. The letter, the annulment, the 3 years of silence. "You left me," she whispered, the words tearing from her throat, audible only to him. "You took the money." Alistair's face, a mask of cold fury, shattered. A look of profound, agonizing confusion replaced it. "What? Money? You released me from my vows," she choked out, the tears she had refused to shed at the altar now streaming down her face. "I what?" Alistair looked from her to the Baron, and a terrible, dawning comprehension illuminated his features. The confusion hardened, not into ice, but into molten steel. "You," Alistair said, turning to the Baron de Vere, "are more than a liar. You are a thief. You stole my wife. You stole 3 years of our lives." "I did no such thing," the Baron blustered. "The marriage was annulled. I have the papers." "So do I," Alistair said. He snapped his fingers. A thin, grey man who had slipped in behind the Duke stepped forward. This was Mr. Pendleton, the chief solicitor for the Ashington estate. He carried a heavy leather satchel. "Lord Finnegan," Alistair said, his voice carrying through the church, "I pity you. You are about to marry into a family built on a foundation of forgery, theft, and deceit." "Insolence!" the Baron cried. "Mr. Pendleton," Alistair said, "if you please, the original parish register." Pendleton opened his satchel and produced a large, worn book. He opened it to a specific page. "The Gretna Green Parish Register, signed by Mr. Robert Hume. And here," he pointed, "are the signatures. Alistair Vane, Evangeline de Vere. I also have a sworn affidavit from Mr. Hume, who remembers the couple well. I have a copy of the letter from the late Duke, which did not disinherit his son, but merely ordered him home. And I have most interestingly bank records from Hoare & Co. The mention of the famed private bank sent a new chill through the room. Alistair looked at Lord Finnegan. "You are a man of finance, my lord. You understand ledgers. Perhaps you should ask your future father-in-law why, 6 weeks after he annulled my marriage, a sum of £10,000 was transferred from an account linked to the Ashington estate into his own private coffers." Lord Finnegan's head snapped toward the Baron. The cold, calculating look of a businessman assessing a bad investment had replaced his nuptial fervour. "Baron," Finnegan said, his voice dangerously quiet, "what is the Duke talking about?" "It's a lie," the Baron insisted, but his bluster was failing. Sweat beaded on his upper lip. "A fabrication. This is slander. He is trying to ruin me." "Ruin you?" Alistair's laugh was a cold, sharp bark that held no humour. "You ruined yourself, de Vere. You simply used my name to do it." Mr. Pendleton, the solicitor, stepped forward once more. "My investigation, Lord Finnegan, was most thorough. The late Duke of Ashington, my client's father, was a man of meticulous records. The £10,000 was not a payment to Mr. Vane, as the Baron here claimed. It was, in fact, the final payment in a series of extortions." A collective gasp, louder than any before, filled the church. Evangeline put a hand on the pew to steady herself. "Extortion?" Finnegan repeated, his eyes narrowing. "Indeed," Pendleton continued, his dry voice cutting through the drama. "It appears Baron de Vere discovered certain indiscretions of the late Duke from their university days. For years, the Baron has been using this information to borrow money from the Ashington estate, which he never intended to repay. He was, to put it plainly, blackmailing him. Alistair took up the narrative, his gaze fixed on the Baron, who seemed to be shrinking inside his fine wedding suit. My father was a hard man, but he was a proud one. When the Baron came to him, furious about my marriage, he saw his opportunity. He told my father I had compromised his daughter. He painted me as the villain. But the Baron, Pendleton interjected, had a problem. My client's elopement, while scandalous, was legal. A Scottish marriage, once consummated, is unassailable in English court. The Baron couldn't have it legally annulled. So he forged one, Alistair stated, his voice flat. He paid a forger in London to create the annulment papers to show his daughter. And, Pendleton added, he forged a letter from my client to his daughter, ensuring her heartbreak. But the true masterstroke was the one he played on my client. Alistair's jaw tightened. He sent me a letter, supposedly from Evangeline. It was her handwriting, her stationery. It said she regretted her decision, that she could not live a life of poverty with me, that she was returning to her father and would consent to the annulment. He even returned the ring I had given her. A duplicate, of course, Pendleton clarified. The original is still on the Duchess's hand. Evangeline instinctively touched the simple gold band she wore on a chain, hidden under her wedding gown, the one thing she had refused to part with. I believed it, Alistair said, the pain raw in his voice. Why wouldn't I? I was disinherited, penniless. What could I offer her? So I left. I went to America to make my own fortune, vowing to return one day to prove I was worthy. I never stopped loving her, not for a moment. He paused, taking a ragged breath. Then, 6 months ago, my father and older brother were lost in a yachting accident. I was summoned back to England to take up the title. I was the Duke of Ashington, and the first thing I did was open my father's locked ledgers. And I saw the payments. I saw the name, over and over, De Vere. The Baron's blackmail, Pendleton summarized, had finally come to light. The Duke's investigation led him to the forger, who confessed. It led him to Gretna Green, where Mr. Hume confirmed the marriage was never contested, and it led him here, to this church. Just in time, it would seem. All eyes turned to Lord Finnegan. He was a man of logic and numbers, and the numbers were very, very bad. He was not just marrying the daughter of a liar, he was marrying the daughter of a penniless liar, a blackmailer, and a forger, who was already married to a duke. Finnegan looked at Evangeline. There was no sympathy in his eyes, only cold calculation. He had come to purchase a pristine title, a clean slate. He was being offered damaged goods, a public scandal, and a potential lawsuit. He then looked at the Baron de Vere. You swore your finances were sound. You swore this girl was unblemished. Finnegan, my friend, we can sort this, the Baron began, taking a step toward him. I am not your friend, Finnegan snapped. He turned to the congregation, his voice loud and clear. This marriage is an obvious fraud. I have been swindled. I will not be made a fool of. This union is dissolved. He threw Evangeline's bouquet onto the floor, turned on his heel, and stalked out of the church, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. He was, above all, a practical man. He was cutting his losses. The bishop, looking faint, leaned on the altar. My word. In all my days. The Baron de Vere, his escape route gone, his lies exposed, his ruin absolute, looked from the Duke's stony face to his daughter's tear-streaked one. He saw no allies. With a strangled cry, he lunged, not at Alistair, but toward a small side door, pushing aside a startled acolyte and fleeing the church. "Let him go," Alistair said, as one of his men moved to follow. "He has nowhere to run. Mr. Pendleton's associates are already with the magistrates. He will be in custody by sundown." The great church was silent, save for the whispers of the ton as they began to process the scandal of the decade. And in the centre of the storm, Alistair and Evangeline stood, finally, alone. He took a step toward her. The fury was gone. The pain was gone. All that was left was the man she had married in a blacksmith's shop, his eyes asking a question she was terrified to answer. "Evangeline," he whispered. "Ava." She looked at the white silk of her wedding dress, a gown bought by lies. She looked at the cold altar where she was nearly sacrificed, and then she looked at him. She didn't run to him. She couldn't. The chasm of 3 years, filled with such profound betrayal, was too wide. "You thought I left you," she whispered, the horror of it dawning on her. "You thought I chose this over you? And you thought I sold you for coin," he countered, his voice thick with a matching agony. The beautiful, terrible, agonizing truth of their situation settled over them. They were both victims, and the man who had victimized them was gone. Evangeline's knees buckled. Before she could fall, Alistair was there, his strong arms catching her, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. He wrapped her in his embrace, his face buried in her hair, and she clung to him, the white silk of her wedding dress crushed against the dark wool of his coat. "Take me away from here, Alistair," she wept. "Please just take me home." "I will," he vowed, his lips against her temple. "I am. You are the Duchess of Ashington. It's time I took you to your home." He swept her up into his arms, and without a backward glance at the scandalized, mesmerized crowd, the Duke carried his wife out of the church and into the awaiting daylight. The carriage ride to Ashington House in Mayfair was silent. It was not the companionable silence of their past, but a heavy, taut silence, vibrating with 3 years of unasked questions and unspoken pain. Evangeline sat opposite Alistair, her hands twisting the ruined lace of her wedding dress. He stared out the window, his jaw set, the muscle working furiously. They were husband and wife, and they were complete strangers. Ashington House was a fortress of wealth and power, its grand facade making Stonecroft Manor look like a tenant's cottage. Servants lined the hall, their faces impassive, but their eyes wide with curiosity. The Duke had left that morning a bachelor on a warpath. He had returned with a bride in a wedding dress. "Tea," Alistair bit out the word to a butler. "In the blue salon, and we are not to be disturbed." The blue salon was magnificent, but Evangeline barely registered the Chinese silk wallpaper or the priceless porcelain. Alistair shut the doors, the click of the lock sounding as final as the clang of the blacksmith's anvil. He turned to her. "The dress," he said, his voice rough. "You should change." "I have nothing else," she said, her voice small. "My things are at my father's house, or perhaps they are at Lord Finnegan's." The absurdity of it, the humiliation of it, struck her, and a sound that was half laugh, half sob escaped her. Alistair crossed the room in 2 strides. He didn't touch her, but he stood close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from him. "He will never touch you again, Evangeline. No one will. Not your father. Not Finnegan. Do you understand me?" "I understand," she whispered. "But you don't. You don't understand what he did. He lied to you. He did more than lie," she cried, the dam of her composure finally breaking. "He unmade me, Alistair. He took the girl who rode to Scotland and he poisoned her. He showed me your letter. Your forged letter. And you believed it? The old hurt was there. The accusation she had dreaded. You believed I was a coward who could be bought. I believed I was a fool who had been abandoned, she retorted, her own anger rising. You were gone. The letters I sent to every Vane address, they all came back, returned to sender. My father said you were in India, then America. He said you were living the life of a new duke. What was I to believe? That the Duke of Ashington, one of the richest men in England, was still pining for a girl he'd known for 2 months. It was a fantasy. My father was right. It was a child's dream. It was not a dream, Alistair said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. It was a marriage. And the letter I received? What was my excuse for believing that? He went to the desk and unlocked a drawer, pulling out a small iron box. From it, he took a single creased piece of paper. It was her stationery, her elegant, sloping script. He handed it to her. She read the words she had supposedly written. My dearest Alistair, I have returned to my father. I see now the madness of our flight. I am a de Vere, and my duty is to my family. The life you offer, it is not enough. I cannot be the wife of a disinherited outcast. Please do not make this harder. I consent to the annulment. Do not try to find me. Evangeline sank into a chair, the paper fluttering to the floor. I never wrote this. I know that now, he said, his voice raw. But then, I was a boy. My father had disowned me. The world had ended. And this letter, it was a confirmation of every fear I had, that I wasn't good enough, that your father's world of wealth and status, a world I had just been kicked out of, was more powerful than what we had. He knelt before her, his hands gripping the arms of her chair, trapping her. His eyes were blazing. I tore my heart out trying to hate you for it, Eva. I went to New York. I worked on the docks. I built a small shipping concern, vowing I would come back one day, so rich that you would regret choosing your father's empty title over me. And all that time, you were a prisoner. I was, she whispered, the tears falling freely now. He kept me at Stonecroft. I didn't have a season. He told everyone I was sickly. He didn't want any other man to show interest. He was saving me for Finnegan, his last, great salvation. The man's greed, Alistair said, shaking his head. It's biblical, to sell his own daughter. Twice. Evangeline looked at his face, the face she had dreamt of, the face that had hardened from a boy's optimism to a man's weary power. Why, Alistair? Why did he hate you so much? Why go to all this trouble? Alistair stood, pacing to the fireplace. That, he said, is the ugliest part of the story. It wasn't about us. Not really. It was about my father. The blackmail, Mr. Pendleton mentioned it wasn't about gambling debts. He paused, bracing himself. It was about my mother. Evangeline's hand flew to her mouth. The Duchess? My mother. She was not a happy woman. My father was a cold man. Years ago, before I was born, she and your father, they had an affair. A brief, passionate, and incredibly stupid affair. She confessed it to my father on her deathbed. But your father, the Baron, he kept her letters. All of them. The full, monstrous picture snapped into focus. He was blackmailing your father with my mother's letters. For 20 years, Alistair affirmed, his voice dead. My father paid him, and paid him, to protect my mother's honor, even in death. To protect his own pride. When I ran off with you, the daughter of his blackmailer, my father saw it as the ultimate betrayal. And your father, He saw his golden goose threatening to fly away. If I married you, the families would be joined. The secret would have to come out. He couldn't risk it. He had to separate us. He had to destroy us. He used my marriage to you as his final, greatest leverage. He demanded £10,000 to make the problem go away. My father, sick and grieving, paid him, and your father got his money, and he kept you, his asset, to sell to the highest bidder. Evangeline felt sick. Her entire life, her love, her heartbreak, it was all just currency in a game played by two old, bitter men. He will pay, Alistair swore, his voice a low vibration, for what he did to my mother's memory, and for what he did to you. He will spend the rest of his life in a cold, dark cell. I will see to it. Evangeline rose from the chair. She walked over to him, her movements stiff. She reached out and, with a trembling finger, touched the scar on his jaw she hadn't seen before. New York. A bar fight. I was not myself for that first year. And I, she said, her voice steel, was not myself for 3. I was his puppet. I was his prisoner. And today I was his sacrifice. She looked up at him, the tears gone, replaced by a cold, clear fire. I am not that person anymore. I am not a De Vere. I am not his asset. She reached under the bodice of her wedding dress and pulled the chain from over her head. The simple, worn gold band, the one from Gretna Green, lay in her palm. I am, she said, her voice shaking but strong. Evangeline Vane. I am the Duchess of Ashington. She held out the ring. Put it on my finger, Alistair. Put it where it belongs. Alistair's hands, which had been clenched into fists, softened. He gently took the ring from her palm. He slid the torn, priceless lace of her wedding dress glove off her hand. He lifted her left hand, his touch warm for the first time, and slid the band onto her finger. It was a perfect fit. Evangeline, he said, his voice breaking. My wife. My Duchess. I am so sorry. I should have known. I should have fought harder. We were children, Alistair, she said, cupping his face. He fought with lies, and we only had the truth. It wasn't a fair fight. It's over now, he vowed, his forehead resting against hers. No, she said, pulling back just enough to meet his gaze. It's not over. It's beginning. The scandal did not just whisper through the ton. It roared. Newspapers, smelling blood, printed embellished accounts for a week. The Duke's stolen bride, screamed one headline. The Baron's blackmail, declared another. Lord Finnegan, it was reported, had fled to his country estate, suddenly indisposed, while Baron de Vere was, as Alistair had promised, in custody. For Evangeline, the world had shrunk to the confines of Ashington House. It was not a prison, like Stonecroft. It was a sanctuary, but a strange one. She was the Duchess, and yet she felt like an impostor. The servants were polite, but their eyes followed her. She was the scandal made flesh. Alistair was a presence. He was consumed, in those first few days, with the legal destruction of her father. He spent hours locked away with Mr. Pendleton, methodically, brick by brick, building the Baron's coffin. Evangeline was given a suite of rooms, a lady's maid named Anne, and a new wardrobe. Bolts of silk and muslin were brought in, dressmakers arriving and departing like humble bees. Alistair had instructed them to spare no expense, but the gesture felt more like providing a uniform than a gift. On the 4th night, she found him in the library, a decanter of brandy at his elbow, a stack of ledgers in front of him. He's been charged, Alistair said, not looking up. Forgery, extortion, and procurement of a false marriage. He'll be transported. Australia, most likely. Evangeline stood by the door, clutching her dressing gown. Am I supposed to feel something? Sadness? He is my father. He stopped being your father when he sold you, Alistair said, turning a page. And what am I to you, Alistair? The question was quiet, but it landed in the room with the force of a thrown stone. He finally looked up. His eyes were weary, the shadows beneath them dark. You are my wife. Am I? She walked toward him. Or am I your victory? The prize you won back? The final devastating blow against the man who blackmailed your father? Alistair stood, his chair scraping violently. Do not say that. Do not ever say that. Then talk to me, she implored, her voice rising. Don't just manage me. You have me. You won. The fight is over. And now you are here, in this library, and I am in my blue suite, and we are as far apart as we were when you were in New York. What do you want me to say, Evangeline? He asked, his hands flat on the desk. That I'm not angry. That I'm not terrified. Terrified? You? Yes, me, he said, his voice cracking. I walk into that church, ready to tear it down stone by stone to get to you. And what is the first thing you say to me? You took the money. The one lie. The one perfect, poisoned dagger that your father knew would kill us. And you believed it. And you believed I abandoned you, she shot back. We are two halves of the same wound, Alistair. But I am not my father's daughter. I am not a liar. I would never have left you. Not then. Not now. Can you say the same? The question hung in the air. His doubt. Her doubt. The ghosts of the forgers. Alistair looked at her. Truly looked at her. Not as a symbol of his revenge, but as the woman he had loved. The woman with the fire and the poetry. The woman who had met him in the woods. I spent 3 years, he said, his voice soft now. Fueling myself on rage. It's what got me through the winters in New York. The rage I felt at you for leaving me. The rage I felt at my father for casting me out. The rage I felt at the world. It's a hard habit to break. He crossed the space between them. And then I saw you. At the altar. With him. And the rage, it was gone. All that was left was fear. Fear that I was too late. Fear that you had moved on. That the girl I knew was gone. She is, Evangeline whispered, her hand finding his. She's gone. She was starved to death in a locked room. But I am here. He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. He brought it to his lips, kissing the finger that now wore his ring. I have not been a very good husband, have I? Not then, and not now. We haven't had much practice, my lord. A small smile touched his lips, the first she had seen. Alistair, please. My lord, sounds like my father. Alistair, she repeated. We have been through a war, and we are both survivors. We are not the children who ran to Scotland. We are something new. What are we? He asked, his gaze searching hers. We are the Duke and Duchess of Ashington, she said, her voice firming. And it is time we were. The Tun is baying for blood. They are waiting for us to hide. They are waiting for me to be the tragic Duchess. I will not give them the satisfaction. What do you propose? He asked, a new light of respect, of admiration in his eyes. Tomorrow night, Evangeline said, is the Duchess of Richmond's ball. It is the event of the season. We are going. Alistair stared. Evangeline, the scandal, you will be eaten alive. They will stare. They will whisper. Let them, she said, lifting her chin. Let them stare. Let them whisper that the new Duchess of Ashington is not a broken, pitiful creature, but the wife of the most powerful man in London. Let them see that the lies did not break us. Let them see us together. Alistair's smile, this time, was real. It reached his eyes. It was the smile from the woods. They will be expecting a martyr. We will give them a queen. Exactly, Evangeline said. He did not let go of her hand. Instead, he led her from the library, extinguishing the lamp, leaving the ledgers and the ghosts of their fathers in the dark. He walked with her up the grand staircase, not to her suite, but to his, to the master apartments, to the rooms that belonged, finally, to the Duke and his Duchess. The ballroom at Richmond House was a sea of diamonds, silks, and calculating eyes. The moment the Ashington name was announced, a hush fell over the entire assembly. It was so quiet, Evangeline could hear the whoosh of the gaslights. "They're taking our measure," Alistair murmured, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. "Let them," Evangeline said, her voice clear and carrying. She was not the girl in the borrowed dress. She was not the bride in the sacrificial white. Alistair had sent to the Ashington vaults. Tonight she wore the Ashington diamonds, a magnificent, formidable necklace of blue-white stones glittered at her throat, a matching tiara in her dark hair. Her gown was a deep, defiant crimson, the colour of blood and power. She was, in every sense, his Duchess. She did not lower her gaze. She did not blush. She met the stares of the dowagers and the gossips with a cool, serene smile. And she walked. They were a magnificent, intimidating pair. The Duke, dark and powerful, his reputation as a ruthless man who had returned from the dead to claim his rights preceding him. And his Duchess, a woman of impossible beauty, plucked from her own wedding by the man she was already married to. They were not just a scandal. They were a legend. The Duchess of Richmond, a woman who prized courage above all, broke the silence. She crossed the floor, her own jewels rattling, and extended her hands. "Your Grace," she said to Alistair, with a nod. Then she turned to Evangeline, her sharp eyes taking in the entire, defiant package. "And Your Grace," she said, with a new, deep emphasis. "Welcome. You are looking radiant." "Thank you, Duchess," Evangeline said, her voice like cream. "My husband insisted I wear the family jewels. It would be a shame to let them gather dust, wouldn't it?" The Ton had their answer. This was not a victim. This was a victor. The music swelled, and Alistair led her onto the floor for the first waltz. "A queen," he murmured, as he swung her into the dance. "I was right. We are a partnership, Your Grace," she smiled. "We must protect the brand." He laughed, a real free laugh that turned heads. As they spun, the crowd parted for them. The whispers had not stopped, but their character had changed. They were no longer whispers of pity. They were whispers of awe, of fear, of envy. From that night on, their story was sealed. Not as the Baron's pawn or the spurned lover, but as the Duke and Duchess of Ashington. Their life was not a fairy tale. The scars of their separation ran deep. Alistair had a temper, forged in the fires of New York, and Evangeline had a core of steel, forged in the ice of Stonecroft. They argued. They fought, not with the lies of their fathers, but with the brutal, cleansing honesty they had earned. They rebuilt their marriage, not on the flimsy foundation of a youthful memory, but on the solid ground of their shared survival. They found they were, in fact, perfectly matched. His strength complemented her resilience. Her intelligence sharpened his power. Evangeline never saw her father again. He was transported and died 2 years later in Botany Bay, a bitter, broken man whose name was never again spoken in polite society. The true ending of the story, the one the Ton never saw, happened a year after the Richmond ball. It happened not in a ballroom, but in a quiet nursery in the original Ashington Castle, a wind-swept, romantic place in the north. Alistair stood by the window, looking out over the moors. Evangeline was in a rocking chair, a small, dark-haired bundle in her arms. "He looks like you," she said softly. "The same frown." Alistair turned, and the love on his face was so profound it lit the room. He knelt by her chair, his hand stroking the baby's cheek. "He has his mother's eyes," he said. "Strong, defiant." "What we went through, Alistair," Evangeline whispered. "I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But I look at this at us, and I am terrified to think what would have happened if that door hadn't opened." "It was always going to open," Alistair said, his voice thick. "I would have torn it from its hinges. I would have torn the world apart to find you, Eva. I was just a little late." "You were right on time," she said, leaning her head against his. "You came when I had nothing left to lose, and you gave me everything." He kissed her, a slow, deep kiss of promises kept, of a future earned. They were not the children of Gretna Green, and they were not the scandal of St. George's. They were just Alistair and Evangeline, home at last. The 3 words, "I am her husband," were just the beginning. They were the thunderclap that preceded the storm, a storm that washed away a lifetime of lies, deceit, and heartbreaking betrayal. Evangeline and Alistair had to fight their way back from the ruin their families had created, proving that a vow made in a humble smithy was more powerful than all the glittering lies of London society. Their love was not a gentle romance. It was a fortress that had withstood the ultimate siege. What did you think of Evangeline's journey from a pawn to a queen? If you were moved by her and Alistair's fight for a second chance, please let us know in the comments. Your engagement helps us bring more stories like this to life. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, share it with someone who loves a dramatic tale, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more historical drama every week. Thank you for listening.